Yes, I'm being corrected now. He had an important administrative matter that he alone could deal with, and he has, well, the learned senior puisne judge, for protocol reasons, could not be leading this, and therefore it has been delegated to me. And that is why I am here as the thorn between roses to lead in this matter. Let me first welcome to this side the learned president of the Court of Appeal, who has joined us for this ceremony. We have limited the in-person judges to only 3 of us, because had we had all those judges who had wished to be here personally, then we would actually probably have a bench which would be maybe larger than the council who are present. And so therefore we want to welcome some of those who are online. I understand that we are being joined online. Let me go through those first. The learned president of the Caribbean Court of Justice, the Honorable Mr. Justice Adrian Saunders, should be joining us online. The Honorable Miss Justice Makala, Chief Justice retired, should also be joining us. We are being joined in person by judges of the Supreme Court and Court of Appeal retired, Mrs. Justice McIntosh, Mr. Justice McIntosh, and Mr. Justice Hibbert. I see. Welcome, lady and gentlemen. I would also like to, and I hope I have all the persons that are present here. One moment for me, please. Very well. Let me welcome first a lot of King's Counsel who are here to support Mr. Williams. We also would like to welcome His Excellency Mr. Alexander Williams, the High Commissioner of Jamaica to the United Kingdom, who is present with us. I will also say that in relation to the ceremony, we have added Mr. Williams as a very brief address after Counsel Mr. Richard Small, because Mr. Williams, I think, might have known the person who's being called longer than anyone else here. And I think that based on that, he would have an opportunity to make a brief address. I want to thank all persons who are here, family members and others, and if I have left anything out, it is really my ineptitude and not any disrespect to anyone here. Yes, I welcome the Learned Solicitor General who is present also, and I believe I have dealt with most persons who are here. Very well. I would now call upon Learned King's Counsel, Mr. Pantry, who I believe is doing the proposal for the applicant, Mr. Williams.
May it please you, my lord, may it please you, my ladies. It is with my great pleasure and honor to propose Terence Francis Williams to be admitted to the inner bar. His career started in 1990 when he graduated from the Norman Manley Law School. And in that same year, joined the government service as clerk of the courts. He was invited to the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions in 1991 and spent a few years there moving through the appointments to be Crown Counsel, Assistant Director of Public Prosecutions, and resigned in 1995 as an acting Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions. During that period, he appeared in the several courts of the island, the parish courts as it now is, and in the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal, and had his knowledge being gained by the exposure to techniques in prosecution. In 1995, he joined the chambers of Mr. FMG Frank Phipps, QC as he then was, where he was exposed to several areas of practice in the area of defense and was able to gain wide experience therefrom. And during that period also appeared in the several courts in the island. In 2000, he resigned and, in fact, went to the British Virgin Islands. Seemed to have been doing 5-year stints, 5 years at the DPP, 5 years with Mr. Phipps, and then moving on to the BVI. Now, it was interesting that in BVI, his position was Senior Crown Counsel, because at that time they had not yet transitioned from the Attorney General's office dealing with both criminal and civil matters. And it was at that time that Mr. Williams created and was very instrumental and pivotal in organizing that office to make the Director of Public Prosecutions an office separate and apart from that of the Attorney General. In 2005, he created that office and they became the first Director of Public Prosecutions in the BVI. And in 2007, the DPP's office there was constitutionally recognized, and that is what it is today. He remained there in that office until 2010, but during that period appeared successfully in the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council on several occasions, and I will mention two matters which he argued, DPP and William Penn, which dealt with the situation of whether or not breaches by the registrar of the Jury Act could vitiate proceedings. Another matter, DPP and Selina Varlak, very important case in the law of evidence. And it is interesting that I taught Mr. Williams at the law school, the law of evidence, and I'm quite pleased to see that he continued dealing with the evidential areas, and so was able to argue the Varlak matter, which dealt with circumstantial evidence among other things. And in relation to that, it is one of the cases being used presently in the law of evidence at the Norman Manley Law School. Now, as I said, he remained in the office until 2010, and in 2010 resigned and returned to Jamaica, where he went to the Norman Manley Law School to be the tutor in criminal practice and procedure, and later was appointed, he was also the course director for that module. Later in that period of time, he was appointed Commissioner of Indicom, and his work in Indicom is well known and documented as a very fearless Commissioner of Indicom, getting a lot of blows and bad comments over the years, but I think he weathered the storm and was able to remain in that office dealing with constitutional matters involving the security forces and other areas which put him in good stead to be involved in the practice of law later on. While he was at Indicom as well, he also continued to do his practice at his tutoring at the Norman Manley Law School. Now, he resigned in 2020 and went into chambers doing a lot of criminal practice and civil practice, appearing before several courts, the island of Jamaica as well, and has, in fact, dealt with several cases in the Court of Appeal in relation to several matters. I believe there are some matters which he dealt with dealing with delay in relation to retrials, and that was one of the cases. It's interesting that we are in this courtroom today because in 2007, I was asked to prosecute Renato Adams et al., and I invited Mr. Williams to assist me in the prosecution of that case. And it was done in this same courtroom, presided by then Chief Justice Lensley Wolf. And that case was the first cell site evidence case dealt with in Jamaica, and also the first case dealing with vulnerable witnesses using the measures that were used for vulnerable witnesses. Mr. Williams has, in fact, authored several articles, presented papers at several conferences, including the conferences held by the Jamaican Bar Association. And based on his scholarship, erudition, experience, leadership skills, and knowledge of the law, it is my opinion that these antecedents that I have mentioned fit him properly and squarely into what would be expected of a King's Counsel. Based on those attributes and antecedents, my Lord, I present and propose Terence Francis Williams to be admitted to the inner bar as a King's Counsel.
Thank you very much, King's Counsel, Mr. Pantry. We now invite Mr. Terence Williams to make the declaration.
I, Terence Francis Williams, do declare that well and truly I will serve the King as one of his counsel learned in the law, and truly counsel the King in his matters when I shall be called. and duly and truly ministers the king's matters and through the king's process after the course of law and after my coming. For any matter against the king, where the king is party, I will take no wages or fee of any man, save as I shall otherwise be permitted. I will duly in convenient time speed such matters as any person shall have to do in the law against the king, as I may lawfully do, without long delay, tracting and tarrying the party on his lawful process in that to me belongeth. I will be attendant to the king's matters when I be called thereto.
Well, thank you, Mr. Williams. I think he should now be robed by King's Counsel, Mrs. Reed Cameron and Mrs. Tanania Small Davis. And having been so robed, we invite Mr. Williams to take a seat in the inner bar. Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. I am checking online because we should have heard from Mr. Justice Saunders, the learned President of the Caribbean Court of Justice. I am not seeing him online now. Let me also, well, if you can confirm if he is online there, but let me also welcome, as I indicated, retired Chief Justice McCalla, who's online, judges Mrs. Justice Henry Mackenzie, Ms. Justice Maxine Jackson, Ms. McCalla, we are seeing her now. Welcome, Madam. And I believe those are the other judges who are online. I'm not seeing Mr. Saunders, who we have on the program. I think particular checks would be made in relation to see if he's actually here. In those circumstances, I would ask Mr. Richard Small, who is on our program, to say a few words in relation to Mr. Williams. Let me say, even if we don't have Mr. Saunders, I think that it is really outstanding the fact that the President of the Caribbean Court of Justice would want to be here. Mr. Williams has the distinction of not only being outstanding counsel in this jurisdiction, but throughout the Caribbean. He is as much a Jamaican King's Counsel as he is a Caribbean King's Counsel. And I think that speaks well for us as a region, and we welcome him in that particular way. Mr. Small.
May it please, Madam Justices and Your Lordship, I am tempted to follow on the comments of the significance of Mr. Williams's standing in the Caribbean, and that we should have the Caribbean Court of Justice's president to address us. It offers some solace to having to hear the oath that we are required to take to be admitted into the inner bar. But Mr. Williams, I can say, very, very well deserves the elevation to the inner bar in continuation of the tradition of leadership that he has offered to the legal profession, both as a and against him because of the varied roles that he has carried out throughout the Caribbean. I have appeared in matters in the British Virgin Islands against him, and the conduct and presentation of his work has been exemplary, and the traditions of the bar maintained by him, both as prosecutor and as defense counsel. I am happy that his return to Jamaica has kept him still available to the Caribbean and of his wide practice throughout the Eastern Caribbean. I think that his elevation is a long-deserved elevation that ought to have been earlier granted. And I am confident that he will continue this tradition that I have spoken of in the conduct as a member of the inner bar. May it please you, my lords.
Thank you very much, Mr. Small. I'd like now invite His Excellency, Mr. Alexander Williams, the High Commissioner for Jamaica to the United Kingdom, to say a few words. It is, well, I hope Mr. Richard Small will forgive me, but it is unusual that we have somebody being called to the bar and his brothers are also a distinguished, to the inner bar, also a distinguished attorney. And in those circumstances, we welcome Mr. Williams. If I can be forgiven for saying this, I think that the fact that they both have served or are serving in this facility is an indication of the commitment to service that not just these two gentlemen, but their family, their father before them and others have in relation to the commitment to service in Jamaica. Mr. Alexander Williams. I understand that Justice Saunders is trying to get on. We hope to have him soon. Yes.
As usual, my Lord Pusey, the few occasions that I have appeared before you, your words are too kind. My Lord Pusey, Lady President, my Lady Senior Puny Judge, it is my great pleasure to see my brother take silk. It is an achievement well-deserved, fitting, and overdue. It is well-deserved because Terence in his career has embodied the action and spirit of what I would regard as the true core desire of all who become King's Counsel, which is the pursuit of the interests of justice in service of others and the state. Beginning his career as a clerk of courts, as the first director of public prosecutions in the British Virgin Islands, and as the first commissioner of the Independent Commission of Investigations, and now as head of Public Law Chambers, a firm of attorneys pursuing human rights law cases here and across the Caribbean, he has established himself as one dedicated to justice, protection of human rights, particularly the right to life and the right to fair trial within a reasonable time. I've had many discussions with Terence about these issues. It is no surprise that as a commissioner of Indicom, he distinguished himself in being fearless, tenacious, and willing to go the extra mile to achieve what he thought was right to protect the institution, the police, and the citizens. That is who Terence is. And these are the qualities you would expect in King's Counsel. During his years of practice, he has argued celebrated cases, most notable ones mentioned by Mr. Kent Pantry, King's Counsel, former Director of Public Prosecutions. You mentioned Varlock, you mentioned the DPP and Penn, there's also Ray Morgan against the Queen, and so on. Now, while Terence primarily practiced at the criminal bar and at the civil bar, there was one case in which I asked Terence to act as lead counsel and I junior counsel. That case is Eaton Douglas against the Queen, Supreme Court Criminal Appeal number 180 of 1999. It was a murder case from the Manchester Circuit Court, which I had lost at trial. Those days I did do a few criminal cases, and I did do a few murder cases. Happily for me, ended in my no-case submission. This one didn't. I said to Terence that I would prefer him to do the appeal because, quite frankly, I knew he would do a better job than I would. We did not prevail in the end, but it was the only occasion up to that time that I saw Terence in action. I did not say to him then, but I'll say it now, that I admired his demeanor and particularly his approach to how cases were to be interpreted, not just according to previous case law, but also according to legal history and against the background of fundamental legal principles. A case authority wasn't right just because it had been decided. It was also right because it was a natural development from a line of previous cases and accorded with cherished legal principles. It felt doing a case with my brother. I know for Terence, as I suppose it is with all of us advocates in these courts, that these years of practice have not been easy, spotted with frustration, perhaps some self-doubt at times, but also a good measure of an occasional triumph, the satisfaction of a job well done after a particular trial, and now the acknowledgement from one's peers that all in all, you are among the best of us in this legal profession. I'm very proud of you, Terence, my brother. I know our father and mother, looking down on these proceedings, are bursting with joy. I know, too, TJ is looking down on these proceedings full of joy, telling you, God, Daddy, touch me. Keep being who you are. Junior counsel would do well to follow your example, your courage to do the right thing in the practice of law, your willingness to instruct others. So congratulations, Terence. Well deserved. May it so please you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Williams. We agree with that completely. The Honorable Mr. Justice Saunders is now online. I'm just going to see if the technical persons can arrange it so that Mr. Saunders can be seen in the primary screen and also heard.
Good morning, everyone. Are you hearing me? Yep. Okay. Yeah. Hello. Yes. You're hearing me? Okay. Thank you so much. My Lord, my ladies, first of all, my deepest apologies. Somehow in my calendar, oh there, is this any better now? No? All right, I've been using these. Let me take them off and see whether it makes a difference. Is this any better now? Okay, excellent. All right. So, my Lord, my ladies, I must express my most profound apologies for being tardy. Somehow I had it in my calendar that these proceedings were going to start at 10 Jamaica time, which was 11 my time. And that explains my lateness. But I'm here, you're hearing me, and I am very, very pleased to be here to support the elevation of Mr. Terence Williams to the ranks enjoyed by the most senior counsel in Jamaica and the Caribbean. As I indicated to him when he informed me of the good news, I said that this was extremely well deserved. And if I could be bold enough to say, with all due respect to those who have the responsibility of conferring the honor, I thought it was frankly overdue. My views on Terence were profoundly shaped back when he was working in the BVI. He appeared before me in a very important case. This was about 2003 or 2004. I will always remember that case, and I have cited the case as well as the arguments of counsel and the manner in which the bench dealt with the case. I have done so on many occasions because the case stands out for me for two important reasons. First of all, it was one of those rare cases in the Caribbean when a senior official of a government was being prosecuted for corrupt acts, for corruption. We don't have too many of those in the region, unlike in the Dutch Antilles. And secondly, the case stands out for me because during the hearing of the appeal, I gained a new appreciation of the natural justice concept of audi alteram partem, and I will explain. This was a case where the then financial secretary of the British Virgin Islands had the misfortune of having to deal with Mr. Williams, who was then the DPP of that territory. It turned out that the financial secretary had been engaging in quite a bit of finagling with the public purse. And he and another were tried in the magistrate's court on charges of fraud as well as charges of theft. The magistrate acquitted them of theft, but convicted on some of the fraud charges. And both the accused and Mr. Williams were dissatisfied with the magistrate's findings, the magistrate's decision. Mr. Williams thought he should have been convicted of theft. And the accused thought that he should not have been convicted at all. And that appeal came to a bench on which I was a member of the panel. Can't remember if I was the presiding judge. I may not have been. But at the appellate level, Mr. Williams, young lawyer from Jamaica, was coming up against Mr. Joseph Archibald. Joseph Archibald was the most senior lawyer in the BVI at the time, probably the most senior lawyer in the Leeward Islands. He had been Errol Bradshaw's Attorney General at a very young age. Very excellent lawyer. Was so used to being successful that I could say this because he's now of blessed memory. He never liked to lose. And he was good enough that he rarely ever lost. And so when he stood on his feet to give his appeal, to present his appeal, we heard him out, and he was extremely convincing. Now, when you're on the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court Court of Appeal, it's an itinerant court, and you set aside a certain number of matters to be heard within a set time. We are there for a week. And when you schedule a case for 1 day or a day and a half, you expect to keep the time. And Mr. Archibald went through so thoroughly and laboriously his appeal and convinced us at the time so much about the merit of the appeal that as time was ticking away, we said to him, Mr. Archibald, you don't need to go on any further. You could sit and we would hear from Mr. Williams. Now, any lawyer who is worth his salt knows that when the bench says that to you, you home clear and just sit down and look at the other side as they wiggle in quicksand. Mr. Williams stood up and we gave him a very hard time because, and this is where my re-understanding of how the alteram partem comes in. Because we gave him a very hard time. Fortunately for him, we had to adjourn for the day. And the next morning, still on his feet, he was patient, he was erudite, he was very analytical in going through the facts and the law. And after a while, we stopped pestering him with questions. And we began to listen to him. And the more we listened, the more we recognized that the magistrate, yes, the magistrate was wrong. The magistrate should have convicted the financial secretary of theft. And the appeal was a hopeless one. And so we said to Mr. Williams, because again, we're running up against the clock, Mr. Williams, you don't need to proceed any further. You could take your seat. Well, Mr. Archibald, who of course is an experienced lawyer, and who, as I said at the outset, knows precisely how school is keeping, when you hear those words, he was mad as a hatter. And he reminded us that we had stopped him before he had completed his presentation. We said, well, sir, you have all the time now to complete that presentation. Of course, he took his time. We didn't interrupt him. We heard him out. But it was already clear to us, and it was even clearer after we had heard him out, that the appeal of the cross appeal was successful, and we dismissed the appeal. And it fell to me to write a judgment that gave our reasons. The financial secretary didn't like the fact that he was convicted of theft, that he was declared by a court to be a thief, and so he appealed to the Privy Council. And I'm not sure, Terence, if you argued the matter before their lordships or whether you didn't, but I know that Lord Bingham made very short shrift of that appeal. But all of this is to say that that case, as I said at the outset, left indelibly etched in my mind the caliber, the quality of Terence Williams as an advocate, and the meticulous manner in which he prepared, in which he presented his arguments. And from that point on, I took an interest in his career. Of course, he's way up in Jamaica and way down in Eastern Caribbean. But nevertheless, we kept in touch. And then his wonderful wife, of course, as a judge, was a member of TAJO, so through her, I also kept in touch. And I was delighted when I heard that he had been appointed as the Indicom commissioner. And from my understanding, he led that agency for several years with the same fearlessness and thoroughness and passion for justice that he exhibited when he appeared before me years before in the BVI. My Lord, the status reserved for the most eminent counsel is accorded in part to enable young practitioners easily to identify and to learn from and to emulate role models. And it is my view that Mr. Williams is more than a fitting candidate to fulfill that role. And so I heartily support his elevation, and I express my very best wishes to him for this new role that he shall fulfill. I thank you very much.
An outstanding indication of the person we have before us. We are going to move in a slightly different direction in terms of from the program. I'm going to invite the learned president to say a few words, and we are going to do that before we call upon Mr. Williams in his reply.
Thank you very much, my Lord. I acknowledge the presence of all persons here and online, and will adopt the protocol already established. I'm honored and I'm humbled by the invitation extended to me by King's Counsel, Mr. Terence Williams, to participate in these proceedings, which mark a momentous journey or a momentous point or juncture in his professional and personal life. I thought I was just going to come and be an observer, a passive observer, but I accept as a privilege and a pleasure the invitation extended to me to make a few remarks. So let me just say I'm not here to speak on behalf of the Chief Justice or the Judiciary, nor am I here to speak on behalf of the Court of Appeal, but I suspect what I have to say is safe enough that they will adopt if they are given the opportunity so to do. But let me say first, my heartiest congratulations to you, Mr. Williams. It is a well-deserved appointment, and I myself believe it's long overdue. I think that you have the body of work that speaks for you. I think that your integrity, your high ethical standards, and just your track record of being a leading advocate in Jamaica and the wider Caribbean qualify you for a moment such as this. Your appointment in the inner bar is a prestigious honor and a testament to your exceptional expertise and dedication. It is a recognition of your marked contribution to the legal profession and your activities and advocacy on the landscape of the region. You're here today because it is recognized that you possess all the key attributes that are required of a person to be appointed as King's Counsel. So we listened to Mr. Pantry, King's Counsel, and I listened to your brother and Mr. Richard Small and everyone else, and Justice Saunders, and I cannot add much more to the accolades. And what I would say to you, though, is that the Court of Appeal supports you, and I think you know that. And why the Court of Appeal will support you is because we have been lamenting the paucity of King's Counsel gracing us with their presence at that level in the criminal justice system. I think the King's Counsel have abdicated their role to lead the younger members of this profession. And every day I marvel. We had to commend the younger persons who are brave enough, courageous enough, not even 5 years at the bar perhaps, who are willing to take up legal aid and to assist us at the appellate level. When it comes on to Mr. Williams, and I will not say and Mr. John Clark, but Mr. Williams has filled that gap, or he's striving to fill that gap left open by advocates of the past, some whose names I will not bother to call, the fear that I will leave out some. But one person of blessed memory I must highlight today is Counsel Miss Nancy Anderson. May her soul rest in peace. She was someone who would take up the fight on behalf of the less visible and powerless in our society. And I refer in particular to those mentally ill persons who have come in conflict with the justice system. They are a forgotten population, and I would urge the newly minted King's Counsel to fill that gap for the jurisdiction and to take with him the zealous, enthusiastic, younger counsel who can make a difference in that sphere. There's a palpable gap left open with the death of Miss Anderson that I would love to see, because I know that there are persons out there who maybe are held at the court's pleasure, who would wish to make an application under Part 75 of the Civil Procedure Rules, but are not able to because they lack counsel. So, Mr. Williams, while I celebrate your accomplishment, my charge to you is simply this. This is not the end of the road. In fact, this is the beginning of a new journey. You're not expected to sit on your laurels believing that you have accomplished it all. We expect you to do what you have to do to continue your sterling contribution to the jurisprudence and your contribution on the legal landscape. We expect you to appear at the Court of Appeal and the Privy Council to argue cases of significant presidential value, thereby helping to shape our landscape and drive legal reform. Why I say all this, Mr. Williams? Because the higher up you go, is the greater the responsibilities become. And the Bible itself says, to him who much is given, much is required. I won't use the Jamaican proverb that the higher up you go, is the more you're exposed. And I say that to myself every day because now the criticisms are going to come because you're susceptible to all that. We expect a lot from you, Mr. Williams, especially where I sit at the Court of Appeal. You're expected to be a mentor, to guide junior lawyers by shaping their experiences and helping them to hone their skills. You're a legal luminary, they say, while you're given this award or recognition. You are at the law school as an educator. So you've been exposed as a judge. I don't think I hear anybody say that in the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, and I read your judgments to see how short they are based on what you always say to me, and I chose not to adopt your style because I have no other way of showing my scholarship except through my judgments at this time. So what I expect from you, learned King's Counsel, is that you will use everything, all your experience from the different facets of your life to help us by giving us publications. This is your duty. We expect you to author legal texts, articles, and publications to share your expertise and contribute to legal scholarship in a more substantial way. So I think I've given you a lot to do, which means that the work is just beginning. I will just speak for one person who cannot say anything, and that's your Mr. the puny judge, senior puny judge to my left, who happens to be my classmate and friend who has been traveling with me for a long time since our days back at the magistrate's court as mere assistant clerk. So I know she's proud of you. She didn't tell me, but I figure she is very proud of you, and so are all of us, because you represent that generation that is now taking its place in the jurisdiction of Jamaica, and in fact, the region. So I don't want the speech to be longer than my judgment, so I will just say in closing that you have a proven track record, you have the competence, you have the zeal, and we know you will deliver, and you will make good all the expectations I've laid on your shoulder. At the end of it all, we know we will be able to say you're worthy of joining this esteemed group of legal luminaries who have shaped the landscape of Jamaica and the region. So may this appointment bring you continued success, greater opportunities, prosperity for you and my dear colleague, Justice Shelley Williams. We want her to be prosperous, it will help us. Job satisfaction and a deep sense of fulfillment. May your appointment shape the development of our jurisprudence and inspire future generations of lawyers, who I'm sure would include your own family members. I see one of them, Catherine, at the back, and my own children who look up to you for guidance as junior counsel. So we wish you all the best in your future endeavors, and I think I can safely say that the Chief Justice would accept this, that the judiciary looks forward to a productive and fruitful partnership with you. Just don't come to the Court of Appeal on Monday to harass us, because I think you're there. You will be there for the first time in your new role. God bless you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. I don't think that there's anything else that I can say to that, save and except that I now call upon Mr. Williams, who has, with all of this which has been laid on you, to respond at this time.
May it please you, my lord, my ladies. I must say it's the first occasion that I am addressing the bench for which I have such affection.
Thank you. I didn't know you thought so highly of me.
I don't know if it is evenly divided, but it certainly is a pleasure. My little friend, Mr. Kirkpatrick, who I thank for proposing me today, reminded me that this courtroom we did a celebrated case in, but this courtroom is also memorable to me for another reason, in that there was a young law student who I offered a seat in counsel's bench in this very courtroom some 30-odd years ago, showing the kind of courtesy the bar should show to law students. And some 30 years later, I now appear before her. And so it goes to, the lesson to it for the young lawyer is be courteous to all. You may very well, it may very well be the love of your life, your wife, your as we call her at home, our area leader, and Don of Dons, that you are offering that seat to. So I thank you. I will be formal, Madam Senior Puny Judge, for everything that you have done for me in the last 3 decades, 2/3 of which we have been in married life. And it is indeed fitting that this occasion I can share it with you. I thank you very much. And I also thank my Lord, you see, and your ladyship, Madam President, for agreeing to sit on this occasion. I am very proud and that you take this opportunity.
I'll only interrupt you for one thing, Mr. Williams, to say that don't worry, I will not ask you to see your instructions. Either.
Indeed. Thank you so much. I would like to begin with saying thank you to my brother Alex and my members of the family present. I have a lot of my family members to thank for where I am today, but I want to speak about my mother particularly. Because my father is was a fairly well-known man in public life. And many people would have known my father. But it was the secret of the Williams family was that there was a true area leader then who was in charge of the household, and that was Mrs. Concy Williams, educator, and Renaissance woman, a woman who could do everything. And we call her the saint because she was a woman of great principles. I will tell you a story about the first time I was represented having got into trouble. I know the bench may wonder, did you get into trouble? But it did happen. And I had very, very good counsel with my mother. I was in sixth form at St. George's College. A lot of Georgians are asking me why am I taking a title that says KC, but we don't worry about that. So I was in sixth form at St. George's College, and the good fathers there had for some reason wanted to expel your narrator here. And I know the bench must think it must have been some trumped-up charge. So I came home that Friday and told my mother. My mother said, first instruction, do not tell your father, and I will take care of it. You don't worry at all. And on the Monday morning, she went to St. George's College, armed with the education code, and her first line of attack with the good father was to show him how he had acted procedurally in a wrong way by not following the education code. But then she didn't stop there. She saw a passing teacher, and she conducted an expert cross-examination of that teacher to show to the Reverend Father that his decision was wrong, which was factually unreasonable. And having done that, not only did the Reverend Father resume my schooling, but profusely apologize for putting me in that position in the first place. So I learned from her that day, never rest your case on one limb, always have a backup limb, and I am forever grateful for lessons that she taught me in life. I can recall once there was I don't know if you all remember, about 30 odd years ago, there was a doctor who had failed to look after a lady in Lanark Town, and the lady passed away. Doctor was awaiting funds. And my mother said to me, if any of my sons fail to give service to the needed because of money, she would be ashamed. So I know we have all practiced. My brothers are here, and we're all in different pursuits. But we have always practiced where, well, of course, you have to earn a living, but money is not the important thing. The pursuit of justice is beyond lucre. And there are persons who can never afford. I say in Jamaica that the hourly rates that lawyers charge in Jamaica, we are doing a service to Jamaicans because we are not charging truly as we should, which is perhaps sometimes why I have to go to other islands too. To make up the difference. So I thank my mother. She was truly a hero to me. I can recall when I had just met the senior puisne judge, and a colleague of mine was Miss Martin, said to me, "You have found your mother." I just say that my wife is just like my mother. I'm sure what she meant is the attributes. At the bar, I was fortunate to very early on have very good examples. I started at Sutton Street Court, which at that time was a criminal court. People might know it now as a civil court. It was a criminal court in those days. And there was a very powerful bench. So Justice Donald McIntosh, who is here today, retired Chief Justice Mrs. Elia McCullough, and His Honor Mr. John Moody, who I think has passed away. And I'll tell you, the clerk of courts, when I joined there was Mr. Evan Brown of Justice of Appeal, and Mr. Patrick Cole, who is retired from the JDF, and that was the bench. I can recall when I was, after 1 month, told that I would go before Mr. Justice McIntosh. And everybody warned me, you better be prepared, because, he doesn't take any foolishness. So I prepared. And I read all of the trial cases for the month. Knew them well. So then there was a mention case. And he asked me, who are the witnesses? I said, ABC, and I got that right. He said, which one is the eyewitness? I didn't, because it wasn't a trial case. And so for that day, I learned the need to be prepared. And I always say that courtroom practice is like an iceberg where 2/3 of it is not seen. It's under the water. It's what you do at nights and in the early mornings or driving to work. 2/3 of it is unseen by anyone. It is preparation. And I'd like to thank Mr. Justice McIntosh, retired, who is here today, for giving me that start in my career, which was quite important for me. I can recall, in those days, you waited for someone from the DPP's office to come and look at you and then advise that you should be brought up. Mr. Justice McIntosh wrote a very good appraisal of me. Nobody came to look at me. I think I was just there 5 or 6 months. And he wrote a great appraisal, and Mr. Andrade, Queen's Counsel he then was, of blessed memory, invited me up. He said to me, you know, you have to thank Mr. McIntosh and two ladies for you being here today. So I said, two ladies. And he told me that it was Mrs. Norma Linton, King's Counsel, and Mrs. Priya Levers, who had called him and said, you have a clerk up on Sutton Street who you must take down. And so he said, with this triple recommendation, he need not send anyone to look at me. And I was brought to the DPP's office, which was a great learning institution for me. And I am particularly pleased to have been proposed by my learned friend, Mr. Ken Pantry of King's Counsel, who was my tutor at the law school. In my early life at the bar, Mr. Tom Tavares Finson and Mr. Ken Pantry were my first examples of how to practice at the bar. I later, I must say, you know, there is a saying that, or story that Ray Charles started off by pretending to be Nat King Cole. So Ray Charles would sing like Nat King Cole. So for many years, when cross-examining, I was channeling Ken Pantry. When addressing a jury, I was channeling Frank Phipps and Ian Ramsey and Churchill Nita, who were eloquent. Tried to challenge the charm of Tom Tavares Finson, for example. Not say I captured it, but tried to challenge it, to channel it. You may say that, that all of these different sounds must have produced a split personality or a cacophony of noise. But somehow I got it to play like for me. And to this day, I tell you, Ken, to this day when I stand up to cross-examine, I look for the little bracelet Kent used to have on his wrist. And when Kent would start to ask questions, he would touch that bracelet. I don't know if you still have that bracelet, Kent. But I still recall that. And when I am researching, I can recall something that Frank Phipps of King's Counsel told me many years ago. Nothing is new under the sun, he told me. So when you're researching, you can always find that right case. Don't stop. Because the problem you're having here, somebody had it before. Nothing is new under the sun. So I've always strived to do that depth of research and to try to adopt the principles and practices of those ahead of me. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Richard Small, who I, as he has said, have appeared against and with. And I think it is important, the lesson I learned from Richard is to have integrity in your practice, to be true to your client's cause, whoever your client is, because Richard, like myself, appears regularly on both sides. And something I admired watching him against me. And I think the important thing is this practice of law is a profession that is learned. And we must always remember that. It's a profession which requires us to keep on learning, to not look at any current precedent as if it is written in stone. It was developed by man, and as time passes, it can also be changed by man as we aim in the long run towards fundamental justice. So I'm indeed thankful for the examples I had at the bar here in Jamaica. As was said, I left Jamaica in 2000 to go to the Virgin Islands. It was, I think I was in the prime of my life then. I could do things then that I can't do now. And so I think the BVI got my 10 prime years of stamina in the courtroom. I think now I am, I think now I am tapering off. But the BVI was an interesting time. And I thank President of the CCJ, Saunders, for speaking and on my behalf today. I do recall the case he's speaking of, that was the Commissioner of Police and Wheatley, which did go to the Privy Council. And I also recall the many battles with Joseph Archibald, Queen's Counsel. It is, Edmund Burke says, my adversary is my friend. He who wrestles with me strengthens my arm. And it's always great when you have a great forensic battle in court. You learn so much, and you develop your own practice. Well, I hope to have many more years at the bar, as long as I'm fit and able, and to continue being mindful of the principles that my mother taught me, and senior counsel at the bar instilled in me, and to be faithful to this profession, which at the end of the day must aim for justice for all people, no matter their condition. And in that regard, in Jamaica, there is still a lot of work to do. May it so please you, my lord and my ladies. May it so please.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. The closing remarks, I will merely say that, as the learned president says, we welcome you to the beginning of, I think, your best years at the bar. I think we are at an end now, so I am at the stage where I will call upon King's Counsel and end this aspect while King's Counsel goes elsewhere and appears before the other sitting courts. So, as the tradition requires, I ask King's Counsel, do you move? Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen who are here. Thanks for being part of this, and we wish you a very good day, and we will adjourn this aspect at this time. Yeah, well, I'm coming back. I'm sitting here. Yes, you have to say that.